The scripture lesson for today is taken from the book of Exodus, chapter 14, verses 21 through 23 and 26 through 29. This is from the Common English Bible. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord pushed the sea back by a strong east wind all night, turning the sea into dry land. The waters were split into two. The Israelites walked into the sea on dry ground. The waters formed a wall for them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians chased them and went into the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses and chariots and cavalry. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the water comes back and covers the Egyptians, their chariots and their cavalry." And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. At daybreak, the sea returned to its normal depth. The Egyptians were driving towards it, and the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea. The waters returned and covered their chariots and their cavalry. Of Pharaoh's entire army that had followed them into the sea, not one of them remained. The Israelites, however, walked on dry ground through the sea. The waters formed a wall for them on their right hand and on the left. So ends today's reading. Praise be to God.
Amen. So, dear friends, we continue reading and rejoicing in Exodus. That is our theme for July. And right now we are crossing the Red Sea. And first I want to talk to you why biblical fundamentalism or literalism is not only wrong, but in active avoidance of divine voice. Of course, you can find a lot of literature if you go to libraries or to bookstores. And on YouTube, different documentaries searching for beaches and for underwater artifacts along the Gulf of Suez or Gulf of Aqaba, right there where it might happen around the Red Sea. There are, for instance, very interesting coral formations which look like mushrooms. They have probably taken for axes of those chariots, and wheels of the chariots are growing on the top of it. And so people thought that that might be it. Of course, those are just the regular formations of corals, and it gave maybe some basis for this story when people saw these formations underwater and thought, oh, those are the chariots, destroyed chariots of Egyptian army. There are also rationalistic explanation. We talked about tsunamis or storm surges, extreme tides, and there are different combinations. But I would claim that is not what is in front of us. That is part of that active avoidance, defiance of divine voice. There is an obsession with miracles, trying to visualize it. I remember some funny cartoons where Moses divides the sea and they are marching, and from the sides those fish are poking faces at Israelites, and they are all scared and almost talking to those fish. Occasionally they would have even some sharks there. And yes, there are even movies with visual tricks like that. One probably feels like in aquarium tunnels, which are real thing. You can go actually within the aquarium into a tunnel and see from beneath the surface, looking up at fish and looking at their bellies, which is nice. But that is part of that active avoidance of divine voice. Because there is a problem. Actually, a bunch of problems. First of all, as we talked about it before, Exodus cannot be dated. There is no epigraphic evidence, nothing written in Egypt or anywhere else which would kind of hint or confirm specifically these events. And there is not only zero underwater artifacts, which I mentioned, but also, more importantly, there is a zero left on the land. There is no trace of large groups of people migrating through those deserts there. And, deserts, they tend to preserve everything in situ, in place. So when you leave there something, it'll stay there most often. Unless you are building roads or something like that. But no, there is actually nothing left. There is no trash left by large groups of people migrating through Sinai Peninsula. This is the problem. Biblical fundamentalism is waste of time. And it is an active avoidance of divine voice. Because there is an invitation, call and demand in this text. And trying to peg it in the spot and in a time is an attempt to avoid divine calling. Because just theoretically, let us assume that they would indeed find the place and would find some artifacts, and then what? Just think about it. They found a place where Moses crossed the sea. They found the remnants of Egyptian army underwater. And what? To make it into a museum so that American tourists could visit? And what? 3,500 years ago, Moses led people across the sea on this very spot. But what? Of course, it is not going to happen that they would discover it. But here you see the problem. It's a double avoidance of voice. Because you can build a museum, but it has no consequence for our lives and for our faith. There is a better way to look at this text. We talked about it, that Egypt in the Bible is, yes, there is a place called Egypt, but this biblical Egypt of Exodus is not a specific place that Egypt is. Wherever there is a slavery, wherever there is not freedom. And Exodus, yes, some small group perhaps left 3,000 years ago, but Exodus is an invitation for all of us, either to participate actively in leaving slavery behind or helping those who are enslaved to leave the slavery behind. And so we will be looking at this crossing of the sea from this perspective. Splitting and dividing waters is actually a well-known ancient image. It's a mythic story of creation. World is in that story created by God, who splits water in two and creates the world. The oldest recorded version of that is from Syrian city of Mari. And it is something like 4,500 years old, and at least 1,000 years before Exodus. A famous story of that creation is from ancient times, from Babylonian story called Enuma Elish. It would be roughly of the age of Exodus story, where God Marduk splits water monster Tiamat, monster of chaos. It splits that chaos into halves and creates cosmos. Cosmos is organized from the remnants of chaos. And in Hebrew Bible knew it also. In first verses of Genesis, we hear about mighty winds sweeping deep waters. And the word for creation, which is used there and then onward, is bara'ah. And it originally meant to divide. It was derived from the meaning dividing, splitting. So here you have all these parts. And in Exodus story of crossing of the sea, all these aspects are present. Mighty wind dividing the sea, and that being a new creation. Liberation from slavery is like a new creation. Radical change, almost revolutionary. Old is gone. New is created. Old abusive and exploitative rules are being divided, and new rules and new order is being created, is being formed. In our struggle for social justice, for racial justice, in our struggle for eco-justice, people still want to reform, tinker, adjust, make it better, reshape, correct of the old. But there are times when it might not be sufficient. Sometimes the new creation is in order, is in place, yes, is necessary. So, for instance, I've been always very impressed with American society and how it is charitable, giving freely to good causes through churches, through charities, through different nations or endowments. But then when I go along the Broadway these days and see those homeless people displaced, very often mentally ill, my heart aches. It hurts. Because I see that all our charity, all our giving is unable to care for those who are most in need. We are applying rules of 19th century of charity and giving to the problems which came in 20th century and are now fruiting, unfortunately, in this form in 21st century. Sometimes we need to cut ourselves and opt for more radical option where the systemic, state-directed care for people is sponsored and fully funded, thoroughly and well. Other nations are able to do it. I think that we should be able to ask for this new creation. It started under Roosevelt. We need to take it into full strength. Or, for instance, enforcing law and peace in a society, it's absolutely needed. But when police is morally corrupt, there comes the time when a break with the past is needed. And reformation of that police is not enough. It might be a time to close it down and start again in a new form, in a new creation. I saw it happening after the collapse of communism when the old corrupt, morally corrupt, not financially, but morally and politically and ideologically corrupt police was simply disbanded, and new needed to be created under new name, new uniforms, new training, and new people. And when law enforcement is hogging so much resources of the public money, I think something is wrong and needs to be fixed. Or we could not stop fossil fuel burning for a very long period of time. It was impossible because we need energy. And then came COVID around. And suddenly They were paying people to take oil from their hands because there was no demand. We know that when we want, or when our lives are online, we can make this serious break with the past. Now I am worried that we are more and more again returning back, and that's a problem. So here you see how taking it mythologically can open our eyes and our minds for a new vision, a new calling, even today. It is not about the past, about Egypt, about the crossing of that specific beach or that specific sea across from that specific beach. It is about something more. And we go into walking through, or actually on, water. And that is associated with that previous image of dividing of the sea. And there are many references predating the book of Exodus. I picked as my reading for the sermon Psalm 77, last two verses. It's talking to God, the psalmist. Your way was through the sea, your path through the mighty waters. Yet your footprints could not be discerned. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. And behind that is also quite common and well understood image, because only deities walk on water on a stormy sea. And here, I hope you'll see it. I'll come a little closer. Here you can see a deity on a stela walking on the sea. You can see those waves over here beneath. They are actually two different kinds of waves. So that archaeologists think that one of those waves might be actually a sea monster snake. But definitely one of those waves are the waves upon which deity, here you have 2 feet or 2 legs. Can you see them? I could not represent the whole thing because it will be to the ceiling now. So that's the image. This is an image of God Baal walking on a sea. And in New Testament, we hear about Jesus walking on a sea. It is an image of authority, sovereign authority over chaotic powers of this world. It is asserting that there is larger and stronger divine order over powers of chaos. And those could be powers of chaos in nature and in society as well. What our story tells us is trust. Obedience to God is more powerful than any weapons. Weaponry leads only to more destruction. That is behind that story of those Egyptian armies being completely drowned. We are invited to step into divine realm, divine logic, not only welcome but become new creation. Not only welcome new creation, but to become new creation. Then we do not need to fear powers of chaos. The matter is to trust in God, who is more powerful than trust in any military, in any army. Because love is more powerful than hate. Path to freedom is not path through war or antagonism, division. It is path of peace. And here you see that it might never happen, but it's happening all the time in our lives. And we are invited to be part of it.